At the beginning of Prophecy of the Wolf, our two heroes, Ragnar Blackmane and Ghazkull Mag Uruk Thraka, have faced off, and a stalemate they have struck. Defeating each other with their final blows, we now have the tale of the Orc war tribes and the loyal Black Wolves, finding the broken bodies of their leaders. An epic duel. The Blackmane strike force Icefang weathered the swells and storms of the Sea of Souls as their ships pressed towards Krongar. The psychic senses of the ship's astropaths and navigators strained through the tormented warp as they desperately sought to reach the origin of Ragnar Blackmane's final transmission. The astropaths of Strike Force Icefang could make little sense of Ragnar Blackmane's message. The Wolf Lord spoke of Krongar, of a trail he intended to follow, and an encounter fate demanded of him. When sending the message, the Wolf Lord's own astropath had somehow managed to convey Ragnar's feral anticipation. The Blackmanes of the Strike Force knew that for Ragnar himself to commit to such a hunt, his quarry must be great indeed. Obscured by its passage through the warp-saturated regions of the Great Rift, the rest of the message was unintelligible. None could even be sure of when it had been sent. But the warriors of Strike Force Icefang had not seen their lord for months, Ragnar having split his great company between several war zones, and the message inflamed their desire to fight alongside him again. Icefang's hunting packs therefore swore oaths that they would reach Ragnar in time to join his hunt and share in the acclaim. The Strike Force spent weeks negotiating the surging warp, their navigators complaining of an increasingly painful psychic pressure as they neared their destination. Reaching Krongar, the Space Wolves found Orc ships streaming to and from its landing fields. The lean craft of Strike Force Icefang silently drifted closer, Auspex's alert. Suddenly, the Vox flared with urgent data spools. It was Thok's spear, the frigate on which Ragnar had forged forwards into the war zone. The isolated vessel was fighting a pack of heavily armed Orc craft, but its shields were failing. Between shouted orders, its curt shipmaster informed Icefang's packs that contact had been lost with Ragnar. A system-wide interference had grown, she revealed, and the Orc vessel had been ambushed by Orc pirates. Even as she transmitted to them the Wolf Lord's drop coordinates, the Icefang Space Wolves witnessed the angular form of an Orc ramship collide with Thok's spear. The frigate's spine broke in two, and both vessels disappeared in a titanic detonation. Icefang's packs were now the only means of Ragnar's extraction. Reaching him was imperative. Their vessels attacked, swiftly hunting down the Orc ships that had hounded Thok's spear. Winding through the expanding debris from the battle, they hoped the cloud of wreckage would mask their ships long enough to land vanguard forces to extract the Wolf Lord. But even as their dropships launched, Orc scrap barges trawling for loot lumbered nearer. Time was short. Descending through polluted cloud, the dropship's sensors picked out a devastated section of Krongar's largest hive city. A district-sized shelf of ruined imperial architecture and barbaric fortifications torn apart and smoking. From this drop point, packs of infiltrators stole through wrecked avenues towards what proved to be the site of a titanic battle. The Space Wolf ship in orbit reported Xenos forces advancing on the area and urged the infiltrators to be swift. The bloody corpses of hundreds of Orcs littered the district's courtyards and the steps leading to the ruins of a great cathedral. The Space Wolf's keen senses noted the telltale ravages of Adeptus Astartes' weaponry. There, they found the first fallen warrior of Ragnar's Wolfguard, his armoured form ripped in two and a rictus of rage frozen on his blood-flecked face. In the cathedral, more of Ragnar's warriors were found dead, the energy signatures in their power armour showing that the infiltrators had only just missed the confrontation. Many Orcs had been eviscerated by a razor-sharp chain blade, while the Wolfguard bodies were rent as if by an industrial guillotine. In the cathedral's primary shrine, yard-thick columns lay recently cleaved before the statuary of local saints. The nave abruptly ended in a gaping chasm where some cataclysm of the original invasion had destroyed several levels of the Hive City. At its edge was the still body of Ragnar Blackmane. the young king. The volatile wolf lord was mangled, one arm sheared off and his neck clearly broken. Blood from his fist-sized rents in his armour had pooled in the shrine's mosaic floor, the wounds too large for his enhanced metabolism to seal. Ragnar's warriors howled in grief and anger, their pack leaders barely able to hold back the more hot-headed from charging out into the hive city on retributive rampages. Calling for dropship extraction, they vowed not to leave the body of their charismatic lord to be defiled by the encroaching orcs. The first of the dropships collected Ragnar's body and took off. Helix adepts watched over the wolf lord earnestly, monitoring their gauntlet arrays for any signs of life. Holding fast at the chasm's edge to cover the withdrawal, rearguard packs of infiltrators spotted an enormous form with the fitful lumens many levels below. A truly monstrous orc body lay splayed out hundreds of feet down. It was missing its head. A feral prophecy. Word of the Wolf Lord's lightning-fast attack had spread like blazing burner fuel among the orcs in the hive city. Even war bosses who had not heard the sounds of fighting had picked up on some vague feeling that somewhere nearby there was conflict, their orcish instincts ever drawing them to war. The warbands in the hive city boasted the biggest and meanest orcs, those who had fought off their rivals to prove their strength before Ghazkull in the hope of taking part in his conquests. They were filled with hulking knobs and their even bigger war bosses, all eager to bludgeon their way to greater power. Despite the constant raids, invasions and looting that took warbands away from Krongar, the atmosphere of the planet was one of building momentum. The war had taken hold of this world and every orc could feel it. From the lower levels, the orcs fought to reach the battle they could hear taking place in the more open district above, the biggest warriors smashing aside any smaller ones blocking their way. Slowed by the cramped human passageways and the ruins left by their own invasion, the orcs forced their muscled frames through jagged rents, or used rockets to blast open new paths. Hold-ups caused some warbands to clash in all-out fights to the death, the furious tension building to a critical point that made them oblivious to the fact that the battle above was ending. When the mobs tore their way into the chasm floor, the fight with the Space Wolves had already reached its bloody conclusion. The noise of receding dropship jets was drowned out by the orcs' natural ebullience, but that died away when they saw the enormous form before them. Even missing its head, there was no mistaking Ghazkull's monstrous frame. After awkward moments when none dared approach the infamously violent warlord, new thoughts began to form in the minds of the smartest warbosses. Narrowed eyes appraised their nearest rivals as the prize of glory under Ghazkull evaporated in the glare of something far greater. Far from Ghazkull's corpse lay an immense granite tablet fallen from the cathedral above. Carved on it was a forgotten vision of Krongar's ancient saint, Vernulf, that of an executioner king and the feral beast he faced. In the shadows at the tablet's edge, a wary Gretchen jabbed at something large, something that had left a trail of blood and broken orc teeth. Cunning and brutal. Legends die hard. In the minds of many orcs, the myth of Ghazkull Thraka loomed as large as that of their warring gods Gork and Mork. For their part, the Space Wolves were torn beyond grief and the desperate pursuit of arcane gene surgery, unsure if Ragnar Blackmane's saga was yet complete. Civil war is too cultured a term for what erupted on Krongar in the wake of Ghazkull's demise. The warbands who had discovered his body savagely attacked each other, their pent-up energy rolling out in waves as green-tinged clouds gathered overhead, flashing with power as though even in death, Ghazkull's embodiment of war was undiminished. Within minutes, the violence had spread as the orcs' crude communication systems sent the news across Krongar. The natural anarchy of the greenskins now exploded into a global apocalypse. Loyalties shifted constantly. Orcs switched sides while their rejected leaders yet lived, and allies turned on each other as soon as mutual foes had fallen. As the goal of succeeding Ghazkull consumed the biggest greenskins, the dead warlord's grand legacy filled the stunted imaginations of a small group of knobs in a different fashion. These orcs had remained steadfastly loyal to Ghazkull over months of conquest, rising under his patronage to become slab-muscled giants in their own right. they were not about to allow the inconvenience of the warlord's death to get in their way. Fighting their way to the chasm where Ghazkull still lay, the warlord's ultra-loyal nobs dug his body free from a pile of dead orcs. While doing so, they spied a grot pulling at a lump of black iron and green flesh wedged under a vast granite slab. A tablet engraved with a clawed warrior and a shaggy quadruped. Kicking aside the Gretchen and hurling the slab away, the nobs found the severed head of Ghazkull Thraka. So ingrained was the warlord's dominance over them that the nob took a fearful step back when a muscle under the head's remaining eye twitched. They looked at each other with a dawning realization. There was only one orc with the skill to fix this kind of hurt. Mad Doc Grotsnik was without doubt a surgical prodigy, but he was also so psychotically inventive and violent that most avoided him. The Doc's eye lit up with bloodthirsty glee when he saw what the loyal nobs had brought him. The grot who had found the head had slunk in behind them, hoping to steal one of Ghazkull's huge tusks. Grotsnik roared at his runts to open his prized cryovaults and power up their contents. He had waited for this moment for so very long, for the nobs who had made the terminal error of breaking into his domain and demanding his services. Grotsnik promised a special consultation free of charge. The wily grot had the sense to sidle out the doors before they slammed shut on the sounds of buzzsaws and blood flow. Broadcasting through makeshift comm systems, the Mad Doc sent out a call to orc specialists of every stripe. Mech boy engineers, psychic weird boys, surgically challenged pain boys, even the odd runt herd and brew boy converged on Grotsnik's hijacked industrial spire. Looted macro capacitors the size of cathedral spires were dragged up the mile-high laboratory's flanks, and weird energies began snapping between them. Coruscating sheets of green power shot skywards, and a continental energy drain made Evil Sun's night races even more deadly. From infested orbital platforms, orcs saw a vortex of green power grow to hundreds of miles wide, and knew instinctively that Gork's brutality, or possibly Mork's cunning, was being harnessed as never before. While Grotsnik's labours gathered pace, his summons were intercepted by possibly the smartest contender for Ghazkull's throne, Deaf Colonel Zogboss. Determined to ensure his own supremacy by destroying Ghazkull's corpse, Zogboss stormed the laboratory spire at the head of his commando kill brigade. Hundreds of his orcs were fried by random flashes of energy. More were eviscerated by Grotsnik's own corpse looters, who wielded excessively large surgical tools. But Zogboss himself reached the laboratory's summit and proceeded to smash up the Doc's equipment and many of his towering constructs. Then he cornered Grotsnik himself, looming over the Mad Doc to deliver the killing blow. Grotsnik's deranged grin broadened triumphantly as he gazed up at a shadowed alcove behind his attacker. Before Zogboss could turn, a claw the size of a goff knob enclosed his head and turned bone, flesh, and iron to pulp. A hunt resumed. Helix adepts of the infiltrator squads had determined that Ragnar Blackmane still clung to life. The threads of his weird, the concept of destiny in the Space Wolves' tribal culture, seemed held together by their lord's fierce refusal to submit to death. Torturous days passed as wolf priests and Medicae servitors battled in incense-wreathed dimness to find some way to restore Ragnar. At last, no other path could be seen but to attempt the perilous crossing of the Rubicon Primaris. All knew this could kill Ragnar, and many were the shouted arguments against it. To die at the hands of one's own kind in so ignominious a manner, rather than in glorious battle, was a fate abhorrent to any true son of Fenris. Ragnar died indeed during this process of resurrection, but the arcane biotech behind his newly grafted organs had been sanctified by the adepts of Mars. Helped, so the rune priests claimed, by his spirit's unwillingness to sleep away the eons just yet, the Wolf Lord of the Blackmanes clawed his way back to life. Whole once more, Ragnar ignored the Wolf Priest's command to rest, and wasted no time in revealing what he had learned. It was Ghazkull Thraka, he declared, who was at the heart of the Orc onslaughts, commanding the primal wars that had torn the Skarsgård subsector apart. Ragnar's Jarls then told him what their infiltrators had witnessed while recovering him. The Orks had found Ghazkull's body. Ragnar's expression set like black granite, his teeth bared. In a voice as low and cold as a Fenrisian blizzard, the Wolf Lord vowed by Russ himself that the Blackmanes would return. They would destroy Ghazkull's corpse to prevent another warboss using it as a rallying fetish, or crush the Orks completely if they had somehow restored the Warlord. Ragnar organised those of his great company who remained in the Krongar system into a pursuit force under his personal command. The warriors were proud to be chosen and made hot-blooded vows to run the Orks to ground and slay them. Ragnar would not risk any delay by forging through the tortured warp to reach the rest of his Blackmanes. He had seen the Orks' resilience firsthand many times. Ragnar knew that the longer they gave the Orks, the more chance their rough Xenos technology had of reviving a monster. Out of detection range of the Orks' crude sensors, the Space Wolves dropships returned to Krongar. As always, Ragnar was the first to the surface, but he now led his warriors on a very different mission. Hunting this prey would require every fibre of his cunning. Krongar churned with Orks, and if the intercepted signals rang true, the planet was in the midst of all-out war. Ragnar dared to hope that this was due to Ghazkull having fallen for good. Whether the Warlord truly lived or not, Ragnar Blackmane had returned to complete the hunt.